Hey there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carrie and this is where I talk about knitting, my tips, my tricks, my opinions, and my preferences. Today I'm going to share with you some of my favorite toilet paper core hacks and crafts for knitters. So if you're interested in that, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's craft. This idea for this video came about because when the toilet paper shortage started at the beginning of stay-at-home orders due to the coronavirus pandemic, for whatever reason, it started tripping in my mind toilet paper roll crafts, and I started looking on the internet and I thought maybe there were some fun kid crafts I could do with my daughter with toilet paper rolls and paper towel rolls. And then I started thinking about, well, what are some ways that knitters can use these things for knitting? So I have 4 ways that knitters can use toilet paper cores and paper towel cores for their knit life. One of the trickiest things to store in knitting are double-pointed needles, and you go to the craft store and you'll see that people are selling these not inexpensive, but maybe more expensive than they really need to be, cardboard tubes to store your DPNs in, and you also see these tubes that allow you to take a project that you have on your DPNs and safely secure the needles and the project. And I'm like, well, do I need to buy that? Or can I fabricate my toilet paper rolls to do the same job? And the answer I found was yes. I have 2 ways that you can use toilet paper rolls to make DPN holders. Number 1 is to make yourself a tube. This cardboard tube is made out of 3 toilet paper rolls. The first toilet paper roll I just cut in half, and I fitted that inside another paper towel core. I marked where the seam should be, took it out, and then glued those 2 ends together. Once the glue along the seam dried, I then glued around the end of that inner tube and put it back into the larger tube. Once everything is dry, the 3rd tube then fits very nicely over that inner tube as well. The last step before decorating is to close up the ends. Very simple. I just take a piece of cardboard and I draw a circle around the outside of the tube. That gives me a line to then put a bead of glue around. Then I can take the tube and just put it right down on the glue. Once that glue is dry, I can then cut around that cardboard. Let me repeat the same process for the other side. Once everything is dry, you can start decorating the tube really any way you want. For this, I just took some wrapping paper and cut a circle around to cover the ends. I then grabbed this ribbon yarn from my stash. I've had this in my stash for years and I never found a project that I wanted to use it for, but this day that I was making the tube, it called out to me and I said, this is why I've had this ribbon in my stash for so long. This is what I'm going to use this yarn for. And so I just glued it around the tube. And there I have a very handy tube. The other way that I used a toilet paper roll was to create a little packet with a slit that allows you to safely store your project that is on a DPN. For this, I used a paper towel roll and I cut it in half, thusly. And unrolled it flat as I could get it. I then took a DPN that I wanted to use for this, and I used that to mark the length of the needle And then, not unlike sewing, I added a seam allowance. I added a 1/2 inch to that length so that I would have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on either side of the packet. I then cut off the excess cardboard. Now with my cardboard to the proper length, I folded it in thirds and then glued down the edges of the bottom half of the packet. So I use magic clips to hold down the edges while the glue dried, but you can use binder clips or paper clips, just something to hold the cardboard together while that glue dries. After the glue dried, I started marking out the slit for the bottom. I just measured in 1 inch from either edge, and then a 1/4 inch from the bottom edge, give me a nice rectangular shape. Doing this in the future, I would probably actually mark that slit a little more narrowly. I use scissors to cut this out, but of course you can also use an X-Acto knife if you want. And there, the envelope is almost complete. At this point, I just take that top flap and I fold it down to meet the top edge of the slit. And I gave that a good pressing. If you have a boning knife or even a credit card to slide across the top, that can help make that fold a little sharper. For the closure, I just took some Velcro and laid that down. Once one end was down, I then removed the backing for the second one so that I could match those up perfectly. And there you have a packet for your knitting needles. Here I have a little beginning of a project on the needles. You just take the needles and you bring it up through the slit, and then that fits down, and you can take your loose DPN and put it in the envelope, close it all up. The project hangs down from the slit and the needles stay nice and secure. And yeah, this took me maybe 10 minutes to make, and all I did to decorate this was I used a purple Sharpie to color it. I found it relaxing. There's other ways that you can decorate this. You can glue ribbon onto this. You can get washi tape and cover it with washi tape. You can paint it. You can decorate these toilet paper rolls any way that you like to make it, fancier than this. And they're very secure. Like, I'm like doing this with them and they're not coming out even with this slit underneath. So even if you don't have a project, this is a really nice little envelope to store your DPNs in. So one of the most heartbreaking thing I see new knitters do is they will get a hank of yarn like this, and they will not know that they need to wind this into a ball before they start knitting. So they just undo it and try to start knitting, and they end up with a knotted mess, and it's just heartbreaking. I actually have a winding station. You can't see it right now, it's off camera, but right here I have a Swift. This is an umbrella style Swift, and it holds hanks of yarn and spins as you're winding your ball. So the hank stays nice and secure and easily feeds off of it while you're winding your ball of yarn. And this is my ball winder, and I, in the course of about 5 minutes, can turn this hank of yarn into a ball. But when you're a new knitter, you may not be ready to invest in a Swift and a ball winder, and if not, you're gonna have to ball this by hand. Now, some people will just take the hank of yarn and they'll put it over the back of a chair, and they will just very laboriously old-fashioned, old school style, wind a ball of yarn. However, this is called a cake of yarn, and what's really nice about this is it sits nice and flat on the surface, and as you work your yarn, it doesn't move around a lot. In order to wrap your yarn into a cake without a ball winder, there's a very old-fashioned tool called a nostopin. And a nostopin is just a wooden rod that you use to wind your yarn around it, and it creates a center pole ball. But if you're not ready to invest in a nostopin, you can just use a paper towel roll to wind your yarn. And editing Carrie here. I later in this video will demonstrate using the paper towel core as a makeshift nostopin, but I will also link in the description box some other videos so that you can really see it more clearly than what I shot. Before I had my winding station, this is what I used to wind hanks of yarn. Not this specific paper towel roll, but paper towel rolls is what I use. Now, there are some people who will actually use their toilet paper core to do the same thing, but I find that using a paper towel core is easier. It's easier to hold it and wind it and do the whole process of building that ball of yarn with this rather than this, but people do use these as well. So when you open up a hank, I'm going to just open this up here, right? You end up with this circle of yarn. Right now this is still being held together. There's a thread right here that's knotting the ends of this hank together that's keeping everything secure. As soon as you clip this, it's like, you want to make sure you have this nice and secure. If you don't have a Swift, things that people will use, as I said before, they'll use the back of a chair. Sometimes you can just set up, like if you have a couple of jars or a couple of cans, you can just set them down on your table and you can put either end of the hank around those cans. One thing that you can do if you want to create a little bit more of a permanent setup for yourself is to create a little winding station. Well, it's not so little. I got this in my head when I was thinking about things I could do with toilet paper rolls as a knitter. Whoops, put that there. And I made this. So to make this, I started off by taking a large cardboard box and cutting out two sides. Then cut out 4 small squares that I could then glue onto the corners of one of those sides. Then I glued the second piece of cardboard on top. This gave me 2 layers of cardboard so that I could create a slider that would allow me to adjust the tension of the hank. Here I'm cutting out a slit and a slider for that. Next, I started gluing on my 4 toilet paper rolls. And the first 3 I just glued right onto the cardboard, and the 4th one I glued to the end of that slider that I made. And that way I could insert it, and now I could slide that tube in and out. So between that hank holder and using a paper towel holder as a makeshift nostopin, I was able to wind this ball of yarn. And it works really well. All I did was I opened up the hank and I put it around the 3 tubes, and then I slid the 4th tube out to get a nice tension on that hank. I then cut the thread that was actually keeping that hank together. And once that end was released, I could unwind a little bit of yarn so I could get started with the nostopin. Then I took the paper towel core, and I like to just go ahead and take the thread and put it right down the middle. One thing I didn't do when I was winding this ball that I should have done was to then clip that end on the opposite side of the tube just to keep it out of the way. All that set up, I could start winding the hank. So to wind this, you start off winding the yarn actually just parallel to the end of the tube a few times to secure the end. Once you get a good spot, you can push the ball further down the tube. Now to wind a cake, what you do is you wrap the yarn in a diagonal, and as you wrap the yarn with one hand, you turn the tube with the other. It takes a little bit of coordination and getting the right rhythm, but once you get that rhythm of turning the tube and then winding your yarn in the diagonal direction, it isn't hard. Now, one thing about using this kind of setup to wind your ball of yarn, a swift actually turns. And what that turn does, it helps just the yarn continually feed off of the hank as you're winding the ball. But this doesn't turn at all, so occasionally you do kind of have to stop, release some more of the yarn from around the hank, and then start winding again. Once you get to the end, you can start wrapping the yarn just parallel to the end of the tube once again. After you're done, you can take the ball and just slide it off of the tube, and voila. But yeah, it's a really easy project, and if you're not ready or you're saving up for your Swift and ball winder, you can always construct something like this and you are set. And the really nice thing about using that hank holder like I built is you can transport it. One thing, if you just set up like a couple of cans on your kitchen table, you've got to sit there and wind that ball of yarn and not move anything until you're finished. And life happens, and sometimes you need to move, and you have animals around, and you don't really want to leave your yarn just sitting on the kitchen table. So the nice thing about a little kind of contraption like I built is you can easily pick it up and move everything and store it securely until you're ready to go back to winding your yarn. So I'm always big on, if life happens, how do I secure my yarn? Because animals, man, they are like heat-seeking missiles. They see yarn unattended and they just want to go for it. Maybe all animals are knitters at heart, because let's be honest, knitters, we see yarn unattended and we kind of just want to go get it. What do you think? Do you think you want to try any of these out? Do you have some of your own ideas? Let me know in the comments down below. If you'd like instructions to any of these projects, you can find that at the blog knitswhereit'sat.weebly.com. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you'd like to keep up to date on everything happening with the YouTube channel and my craft life in general, you can find my social media down in the description box. If you haven't already, make sure that you hit subscribe and you click the notification bell, which will let you know whenever I upload a new video. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be watching this. And as always, happy health and happy knitting and crafting. Bye! So today I'm going to share with you some of my favorite ways to use toilet paper rolls and paper towel roll cores for knitting stuff. Accessories? Not really notions. I don't know what I'm saying. You give me a sewing machine and the right presser for... excuse me, burp. If you'd like to follow me on social media so you can always keep up to date on what's happening at the YouTube channel, all my social media is in the description. And for paper towel, why can't I say it? Toilet paper. All right.